We already did that one.
Oh, yeah. Did we?
Uh-huh.
Dang it.
Or no. We did the Here Comes the Sun.
Da, da,
Or did
da,
we
da.
do Blinded by... I don't know.
I don't know.
Either way, demonetized.
Demonetized.
Just in case you didn't know, I'm Matthew.
And I'm Brian.
And this is Road Trip Recap. Spoilers up ahead, as today we talk about the Route 666 episode of Supernatural.
We're also going to be taking a look at haunted vehicles and phantom cars.
Well, hello, Christine. Buckle up and let's go. So our episode starts out in where?
Cape Guardo, Missouri.
I don't know how to pronounce that. That's what he says it's called. I don't know.
According to the internet.
Well, it's got to be true then.
Yeah. Well, according to the International Phonetic Alphabet.
So that's where it's set as far as what they tell us. What I found while looking up stuff for the episode, if you actually look, a lot of the cars have Mississippi license plates because it was originally going to take place in Mississippi, but it was snowing, and I hear it doesn't snow that often in Mississippi. It was also supposed to be the middle of May, in which case it never really snows
in Mississippi.
So they moved it a little bit, and you even have at the beginning, like the radio was just like, unseasonable cold front moving in. Anyways.
At least they took the time to try and explain, FYI, this isn't supposed to happen.
Must be all that paranormal activity. Anyways, we start on this kind of old country road. This guy's driving along.
Country road.
It's not going to take him home.
No, it's... it kind of takes him home.
Well,
yeah.
Guy's driving down the road, starts being followed by a truck, and the truck just runs him off the road. And then it's a disappearing, reappearing truck. It's following him, then it's gone. And then it's back, but it's in front of him. And side note, when it appears back in front of him and he turns around and drives away and it chases after him, I didn't notice it every time I watched it, but I was told to kind of look for it. And when the truck is chasing him, it's kind of in shadow, so you don't really pay that much attention. But if you look closely, there's 4 or 5 people in the back of that truck, which was probably the film crew to film the chasing or whatever.
Yeah.
But if you look at that when they're driving away, there's definitely people in the back of that truck. Anyways.
Good old, what was it, 2005 this would have been?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It might have been 2006 at this point.
Yeah.
Because we're getting to the halfway point of the season.
There's no way they would notice this in something like 4K. Well, sure enough, here we are.
Anyways, it runs them off the road and then the truck proceeds to disappear. We then cut to Sam and Dean. They're doing their thing. Sam's getting ready to head to Pennsylvania. Dean's like, we're not going to Pennsylvania. I got a call from an old friend. Her dad just died, and we're going to go check that out. She thinks it might be our kind of thing. And he goes, old friend? What do you mean by that? He's like, friend that's not new. And he was being very dodgy, and Sam's like, something's going on. What's going on? And, we end up finding out that Dean and Cassie had a thing, and Dean told her about what they do, and Sam's not happy about that because that's their one rule is you do what you do and you shut up about it. And Dean references that he met her when him and Dad were in Athens, Ohio, working a case. I believe she was at college. Mm-hmm. Apparently Athens, Ohio is one of the most haunted areas in that area, so it would explain why they would have been up there working a case.
We got a place to go visit at some point. Athens, Ohio.
They get into town. We get a look at the newspaper. The mayor's trying to keep things from being published and everything, and the Cassie and the editors not really having it and all that. We get them talking about her dad and everything, what happened. They find out that her dad was mentioning this truck before he died. It wasn't just a single car accident. He knew something was falling. There was something out to get him, even though there were no tracks. It looked like something had hit his car. So there was also a friend of the dad's that had died the same way. So just a car accident. There were only the one tracks, but it looked like something had hit the car. We get a little bit more of the Dean Cassie backstory where they were dating. Dean told her kind of what they did, and she didn't believe it. She thought it was BS, whatever. And so that's kind of what happened. As we go on throughout the episode, we find out that she broke up with him, which I thought was obvious at that beginning part. but Sam has to clarify later. But anyways,
it basically removes any question about, like, by the way, she dumped him.
Just in case you didn't know, he got dumped. We also see that, Cassie's mom doesn't want to talk about what's going on. Like, they're trying to get some more information, but she doesn't want to talk about it. We then see the editor of the newspaper get run off the road, by the same truck and everything. And so it's been noted up until this point that they've all been black individuals that have been killed by this truck. Cassie wants the mayor to, like, shut down the road where all these people have been dying on, and he's not going to do it, whatever, doesn't want to make it a big deal. And she, like, pulls out the race card and was just like, would you do it if they were white? He was like, are you saying I'm racist? I'm, like, one of the least racist person. You ask your mom about that. She can tell you. So,
which is not a great argument for anti-racism, is to say, I'm not racist and you should ask this person. It's not the best argument for it.
But turns out accurate.
And yes.
Which,
in this case, yes.
As we learn throughout the rest of the episode, which we'll get to, it makes sense. But yeah. If you were to just have a normal person just say something like that, like, that's usually not a great defense there. Sam and Dean go to investigate to see if they can find out, if other people had died that way. I had mentioned this truck as well. So they start doing investigation as, like, insurance agents. So just doing some, like, mental health questions or whatever.
Yeah.
And they learn that this truck had been seen before, but back in the 60s. It was like a real truck that was supposedly abducting black men, and then they would just disappear, and then suddenly it stopped. And so they start doing some more investigations, trying to find out, like, what could have caused this. They don't go to investigate immediately. It's at this point, Sam's like, you need to go talk to Cassie, like, work things out or whatever. And they do. They reconnect.
They certainly do work it out.
Side note on this, supposedly, the editors or whoever, when they were doing this, as they're going through, like, censorship, whatever, the one thing that they were told about this whole Dean-Cassie thing is Cassie can't be on top, was their thing. And because it's supernatural, they're just like, oh, okay, so the first scene we get with Dean and Cassie is her on top.
Yep.
They end up rolling over or whatever, but, it's just their thing. I'm just like, we're going to do what we want.
Well, whatever.
Like, we're not going to follow these, like, ridiculous
that
rules.
That is such a weird censorship rule.
I don't even think it was censorship. It was just like
the FCC's, like, warning about it. Like, just so you know, we're not really partial to that.
And it may not have even been censorship. It was somebody told them that that was a thing they couldn't do. It's at this point, we then see the mayor. He's out in the middle of nowhere kind of looking at some plans, and then he gets run over by the trucks. So maybe there was something to him not being racist. It's at this point they go to do some more research, and Sam finds out that the mayor was looking at an old Dorian place. The Dorian family had owned, like, most of the city. They used to own the newspaper, and so as Dean's trying to, like, find stuff of this truck back in the 60s and things like that, not a lot is written because things were extra racist back in the 60s, and so, like, they didn't really report on missing black people and, stuff like that. And they did find one of Cyrus Dorian who went missing, and so Dean's kind of keeping on that. Or he keeps that article, and we get to where eventually the truck follows Cassie home. Like, it's threatening her at her house. It's like, I'm gonna drive up aggressively to your window, and that's it. Which, I mean, that's still scary. I'm not trying to downplay that any, but, like, he doesn't, like, actually do anything. It's just driving at the house, which, you know what, I'm not even gonna give a hard time about. I'm just gonna move that.
That still would be pretty intimidating, to be in your home and suddenly having this giant truck, like, threatening to try and come crashing through your wall.
And it's, like, teleporting around to every window she goes to.
Yep.
So that's fair. So it's at this point they finally get Cassie's mom to open up. So Mrs. Robinson starts talking about how she actually dated Cyrus back in the 60s, and then she started seeing Martin and preferred him, and then Cyrus kind of went crazy and started abducting people and killing them, and Cyrus actually, as Miss Robinson and Martin were going to be getting married, on the day they were supposed to get married, they decided to get eloped instead, and the church they were going to get married in got burned down while there was a children's choir practice, and all the children died during that, which around that same time frame, this may have been kind of like a reference to, in 1963, there was the 16th Street Baptist Church that was bombed in Birmingham, Alabama. And there was 5 children doing choir practice, and 4 of the 5 children were killed in that bombing. So it may have been a reference to that. Anyways, Cyrus then abducts Martin and starts beating him, but Martin's not going to go down easy, and Martin turns around and ends up killing Cyrus.
Beats him back.
Yeah. Side note on this one that I found interesting as I was looking, the young Martin Robinson was played by Ron Robinson. And Ron comes back later in season 3 when Sam and Dean finally get arrested by Henriksen.
Oh, yeah.
He's one of the possessed men that's attacking, that's surrounded by... Yeah. So that actor comes back as a possessed man in season 3.
I don't know if there's any way to headcanon that.
Well, I don't think so, because, I mean, he was a guy back in the 60s that died in 2005 as an old man.
Yep.
So, different people.
Yep, different.
Anyways, it's at this point, we find out that Martin then calls up his friends, and they dispose of the body. They put Cyrus in his truck, and they just push it into the lake or whatever.
Yeah.
And these were all of the people that had been killed by this ghost truck. And they're like, well, what about the mayor? Like, what happened there? Well, he used to be a deputy back in the 60s. And when he was investigating the missing persons report from Cyrus, he found out, like, what Martin had done. But he also knew what Cyrus had been doing. So he was just like, I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
Guess we'll never figure it out. So that's kind of...
Basically buried the evidence.
Right, and that's who the truck had been going after, is all of the people that had taken part in, killing him and hiding the evidence and everything. And it started up right now because the mayor had bought his old house and bulldozed it, and so I guess he just anger spirits, and that can cause them to come back or, whatever. So Sam and Dean go to dredge up the truck. They get it out, and they salt and burn the body, which just makes him mad. So at this point, Dean's like, well, I'm going to lead him away from here, like, burn the truck. And Sam's like, how am I supposed to burn a truck?
What am I supposed to do?
Especially a truck that is soaked. Maybe if it was soaked in gasoline, you'd have something there. But no.
I mean, and if it hadn't been sitting in the water for that long time and diluted all the gasoline that was sitting in the tank, maybe they could have blown it up. But I mean,
So anyways, Dean's taking off, and he's calling and was like, what do I do? And he's like, I need a minute. Like, I don't have a minute. And
the poor Impala is just getting beat up at this point.
Which, I mean, kudos to that. He was doing, they show the speedometer, he's doing 100 miles per hour. So, I mean, it's still got some power to it.
Yeah.
Anyway, Sam calls and is like, listen, I need some information, and I need you to be exact. Which, I've noted problems with episodes before, and I found that when I go back and I rewatch, there's always something in there, like if you're really paying attention, it solves that problem.
It just answers it.
And so almost anything where, like the Asylum episode, where, I mentioned, like, why would Dean be carrying around an empty gun? We see a scene of Dean, like, being suspicious of what's going on and grabbing the gun out of the duffel bag to, like, he knows what could potentially be happening because these people have been killing people after, whatever. So he's just like, oh, well, maybe I can pull the old switcheroo. And anyways, Cassie's mom knows exactly where the church that got burnt down used to be, like to the 10th of the mile on this road. And so I'm just going to give Supernatural the benefit of the doubt and assume that there's something in the background or something that was said at one point to where, like, Cassie's mom was a cartographer or something and just knows the exact layout of this town.
I mean, Google Maps wasn't a thing back in the 60s, so maybe you had to know, like, your directions a lot more, like when you're telling someone how to get someplace, you have to know them a much more specifically than we need now, which is like...
I don't know if it would be like, on something like that, it'd be like turn left and then it's the church at the end of the road.
Yeah, I mean, that's true too.
You're going to have to drive 7/10 of a mile before you see this church.
I'm just throwing it
But
out
it's
there.
at the end of the road. 7/10 of the mile at the end of the road. But, anyways.
It's called the 7/10 Church.
So anyways, Dean drives the 7/10 of a mile. He turns around. Okay, what do I do now? Is it just what you're doing?
Oh my God.
Just wait. So Dean's like, okay. And the truck charges him, and then the church grounds destroy the truck. Dean's like, what happened? He was like, well, that's where the church used to be. An evil spirit crosses hollow ground, and, sometimes it gets destroyed. And, I just thought maybe it would work. Maybe? You did this on a maybe? What if it did work? And honestly, it didn't cross my mind. So here we got another little bit of...
It's much more guesswork than anything else.
The supernatural cheating of something that they kind of wrote themselves into a corner, and they're just like, they know exactly where the church is, and they can destroy evil spirits.
Well, there's actually something to that. Is in like a lot of in different mythologies and in different folklores and things like that, you have this idea of a threshold, and a threshold is something that houses and churches kind of lay down. And
That's why he couldn't get to Cassie in the house.
Yep, and supernatural beings, especially malevolent ones, or even benevolent ones, have a lot of trouble unless given permission crossing a threshold to the point where it actually can destroy or severely weaken them. That's why in some mythologies you hear about vampires not being able to enter a house unless given permission, and that's because the threshold will actually take them out. So there's a little bit of it, but normally it has to exist, and the fact that the church wasn't there kind of stretches the idea of a threshold pretty well.
Well, that wasn't the threshold as much as the hallowed ground.
Exactly.
So, I mean, it was still a holy place, even though the building wasn't there. So then we end our episode on a happy note. Dean and Cassie, they separate on good terms. Like, they know they're not going to be able to, like, be a thing or whatever, but they're getting along now. Things are good. So
all is well.
Not a whole lot of extras in the side of like reoccurring actors or everything, but
that's because last episode made up for it.
Oh, that one burned me out a little bit.
That one about killed you.
By comparison, like it took so long to get through, like how many extra people in that one. Once I got through this episode, I was like, is that it?
Is that everything? Did I do it?
Well, anyways, once we turn a corner and we can see again, let's talk about some of these haunted vehicles.
Yeah.
Blinded by the light. Well, we already did that one.
Oh yeah. Did we?
Uh-huh.
Dang it.
Or no. We did the Here Comes the Sun.
Da, da,
Or did we
da,
do Blinded by... I don't know.
I don't know.
Either way, demonetized.
Demonetized.
Let's talk about some haunted vehicles. Tell me about Christine.
So the idea of like a phantom vehicle or a phantom car has actually been kind of an idea since the Phantom Traveler that we talked about in episode 1, as well as like different haunted highways, things like that, where kind of the stories are very similar. There's a couple different types of them where someone will be driving along the road. There's actually a reported instance in London where a driver was driving along the road and witnesses suddenly saw him driving normally and then swerve severely as if to get out of the way of something, slam into a wall, and then die upon impact. And what is thought to have happened is that there's been a rumor of a phantom bus that drives the road that will suddenly appear in front of you and be like ready to charge you down and then suddenly disappear just as it's about to make impact. And then as you look behind you in your rearview mirror, there's nothing there anymore. Or sometimes that bus will even be driving alongside you. Suddenly it'll appear out of nowhere, go down the opposite street, and then as you look behind, there's nothing there. All you see are the headlights in the front of the bus, and then it completely just disappears.
So that's in London?
Yeah, that was thought to be in London. There have been other reported sightings of cars that'll suddenly come to life. There was a story in South Africa of a car that would suddenly turn on and start jumping, where it started jumping back until it hit a wall. Police were called to investigate, and when they got there, the car suddenly started back up again and jumped until it hit a tree and then stopped. They found that the car, it had a rusted out kind of ignition, and so they were thinking that could be one of the reasons why it was starting up on its own.
Sure.
But why it started jumping back, they weren't able to figure out, and simply said, okay, that was a thing that happened. There have been reports as well of cars suddenly veering off the road and going into ditches, but as the police arrive to investigate, they are unable to find the vehicle in question. An example actually occurred in Britain once again, and essentially drivers were driving down a highway. A car that was in the lane suddenly turned off and went straight into a ditch and crashed. Everyone got out of the cars. They immediately started to try and investigate to figure out where the car was in the ditch. Weren't able to find it, and then they call the police. The police show up. They're not able to find the car in question either. But then as daylight comes up, they find an old rusted out vehicle that has been sitting in the ditch for probably years and years and years, and that's thought to be what the phantom vehicle is. So phantom vehicles have been around, although they're more like folklore than they are, or more like rumors or unsubstantiated blog postings. It's less of a substantial haunting where, you have years and years and years of folklore. It's more like you can go on haunted blogs and find people reporting these phantom vehicles coming out of nowhere and, forcing people to drive off the road, or that are driving off the road themselves. Probably one of the most famous examples, though, of a potentially haunted and or possessed vehicle is Little Bastard.
I was wondering if you're going to bring that up.
James Dean's car that he died a week after purchasing.
Oh.
In. It was then thought after he died and rolled the vehicle that the car was then bought and then pieced out and put into different vehicles. The rumor has it that all of the cars that had pieces of Little Bastard in it would end up meeting their own untimely ends or their own injuries and their own accidents. And so it's thought the car itself had now been cursed. However, it's thought that most of these are simply ways of the individual who bought the car was simply spreading these rumors in order to try and make the car more and more famous, so he'd be able to sell the body of that vehicle for even more money later on. But again, it comes down to that whole, as we discussed in the curses thing, is that sometimes it's really easy to connect the dots between objects that have really bad vibes or really bad luck tied to them and be like, this is cursed, this is evil. So yes, not a lot to really go on, but it's almost as if it's a mythology that is beginning to start up and gain legs of its own, as vehicles are still a pretty new thing. But we're even seeing things like phantom airplanes now. We're seeing phantom buses. We're seeing phantom trains, as well as the phantom cars.
Don't forget the subway from Ghostbusters.
This is true too.
Winston.
Oh man, I haven't seen that movie in forever. So what are we looking at for next episode, Matthew?
Next episode, we are watching the episode with Max. And we're, I guess, looking into telekinesis.
We are looking into telekinesis.
Telekinesis, Brian.
With mind bullets.
Knives. Mind knives.
Mind knives?
Yeah, he used knives.
Oh, no. Come on. Tenacious D here? You just put
Yeah, I know. But I also said Brian instead of Kyle, so I'm changing it to knives instead of bullets.
I didn't track with you on that one. That's a little sad. That was a missed opportunity is what that was.
Yeah, well, life's full of those. I guess that'll do it for today. So until next time, buckle up, stay safe, and
we got work to do. Mind knives.